It's a beautiful autumn day here in Tasmania, and as you can see, I've been picking some tomatoes. The tomatoes are coming to the end now. The last ones are ripening, but there's some good tomatoes there. The vines are starting to die off because it is the end of the season. I wanted to talk to you a little about the variety of tomatoes that I have grown this year and some of the pluses and minuses of each variety. Also, we'll have a look at what I'm doing with the tomatoes this year in terms of preservation. There are 4 types of tomatoes that I have grown this year. 3 of them out here, the other one in the greenhouse. Now, the first to come to crop is this one, which is the Rouge de Marmande, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. If not, correct me, but Rouge is what we generally know it as here in Tasmania. And it's a really nice home garden tomato. One of the big advantages of this tomato is the fact that it's a really quick growing, and so it really suits a short season really well. So if you're in parts of Tasmania where your season is particularly short, this is probably the tomato you should grow. It's a very soft tomato, very soft skinned and nice juicy tomato, really great in a salad. Not the ideal tomato though for preserving, making tomato sauce, or for drying, but of course you can do it. But great salad tomato, often has some more odd shapes. This is one of the last of the season in terms of any decent size. They will come larger than this, but there's quite a few smaller ones still on the vines, which have pretty much died now because, as I say, these were the first tomato. I grow Rouge pretty much every year because of the fact that it's going to come earlier. Now, for a few years, I've been growing some seed that came from a friend, and I've known it as Roy's Giant. He didn't really know what it was called, and it's a nice big tomato. This year, Samuel chose some mortgage lifter seed, and I planted that as well. And the obvious thing that has come along is that my friend's tomato is the mortgage lifter, because the ones here from these mortgage lifter vines behind me are exactly identical. And look, they're a beautiful sized tomato. You make a really good salad or feed a couple of people out of a single tomato. They ripen later than the Rouge. The only downside that I really have with them is that quite frequently I notice a little bit of damage along some of the creases, and also where the stem is, that it can sometimes crack up in that area. And that means that if it's wet weather, you can get moisture in and it will rot it. And this particular one here, there's a little bit going already, even though it's not 100% ripe. But beautiful tomatoes, and that's what I'm picking most of at the moment. One thing I will add with the mortgage lifter is that it is a really nice fleshy tomato. Not as juicy as the Rouge, more solid in its flesh, and that makes it a really great salad tomato. Lovely to make a sandwich from. Really nice. I'll be growing this again, even though it does come later in the season. The other tomato that I grow outside are these Romas. Now, this is a indeterminate Roma, and this is the second year I've grown these. They turn out some beautiful size egg-shaped tomatoes. Now, Romas traditionally are the prime tomato that I use for sauce making or for bottling, but this year I might actually try something different, and I'll come back and talk about that later in the video. But these tomatoes are really a firm tomato, so they actually keep for quite a long time as a ripe tomato. The skin is quite hard and it's not prone to damage. And so that's a really good thing, but they're not really as exciting in terms of putting into a salad. They don't have the juiciness that something like the mortgage lifter has, or the Rouge. So not my favourite for fresh eating, but great for cooking or drying. They're also one of the favourite drying tomatoes. But in terms of production, as you can see, they've done really well, and in terms of the Tasmanian climate, I think they're a really good tomato. They come along a little bit later than the Rouge, but a little bit earlier than the mortgage lifter in terms of ripening. But they will hold quite late into the season too. You'll see there's some, still haven't ripened here yet. And even though the vines might die, quite a few of these will ripen. Some may not, because the season is so late this year. Normally they'd be coming a little bit earlier than this. The fourth tomato that I grow are these Gardener's Delight. Now these are a small egg-shaped tomato, really a type of cherry tomato, but they've got that little oval shape. Now they're real, as the name suggests, delight because of the productivity that they have. These vines look pretty terrible this year. I didn't do much work in terms of giving them structure to climb on or tying them, so they're really messy, but there's still heaps of tomatoes here. Now I've been growing these for quite a few years and they are so reliable. Now I grow them here in the greenhouse simply to extend the growing season. They don't need to be grown inside. They would just as well grow quite happily over the summer outdoors in Tasmania. Very productive tomato, and if you like a cherry type tomato, these are great. I was intending to grow some other tomatoes in here this year. If you go back in my videos, you will see that I actually planted some other, I think it was some Tiny Tom or something along those lines, seed in this bed, but it didn't germinate. I planted it twice and it didn't come up. Because I've had these growing in the greenhouse previously, I had heaps of volunteer plants, so I just went with these. Sometimes you have to just run with what you've got. Obviously, the seed that I had bought was just not viable at all. I'll have another go to grow a different variety, but these I found a really reliable producer. Being an indeterminate plant, they just ramble and they become huge. So you need quite a bit of space if you're growing these. But yeah, a really enjoyable tomato, great little snack. So today I've come back to pick these Roma tomatoes, which have been ripening very nicely over the sun we've had over the last few days. Not so sunny today. And today what I'm going to do with these is to dry them. So once I've finished picking here, I'll go and fire up the wood-fired dehydrator, get it warming up, and then we'll cut these tomatoes up into sections so that they can dry, and put them on the trays, and they'll then be there for a couple of days drying. So these tomatoes have now been in the dehydrator for 2 full days, and it's time to come and get them out. Now, some of these are fully dry and will keep for long-term storage, and you can tell simply by feel the ones that have dried out sufficiently. But there's some that have some moisture in them, like this one, which is really a semi-dry tomato. Now the option would be to dry it further, or what I will do is put it into a separate bowl where it can go with oil and be used as a semi-dry product rather than a fully dry product. So just a quick sort will give me 2 different sections and 2 different products, which can be utilized in different ways. So I'm quite happy with that. I could, as I say, just dry those further if I really wanted to keep them. for longer term. The greatest inhibitor to drying is the skin. Now I did put some of the mortgage lifter tomatoes in, which were sliced, and you'll see here some slices of mortgage lifter. Now these dried earlier and very quickly because the skin was only around the edge, and this was about a 1 centimetre thick slab of tomato, and it dried very quickly and very well. This, of course, while it's a faster drying method to keep the skin only to the edges, it does take up more space on the tray. So this is the end result. We've got one larger bowl, which is the fully dry product, and the other lesser amount, which is a semi-dry, and that will need to be stored in oil and probably will not keep as long, but it's a different product and will be used in a different way. This represents that one large bucket of Romas plus half a dozen extra mortgage lifters that were sliced up as well. So it's really interesting to see how tomatoes condense once they're dried, and gives you some respect for the price that dried tomatoes actually get in the marketplace. So which tomato is the best and which should you grow? Well, there really isn't a firm answer on one being better than the other. They all have a purpose, some coming early, some being better for salad eating, and others better for processing, whether it's drying or bottling. So I think growing a range of tomatoes is a really great idea. And looking for a tomato selection that's going to give you some staging as to when they come, so they don't all come ripe at once. So you're getting some earlier, some mid-season, some later. And also thinking about your end product that you're going to have, whether it is fresh eating or processing. And I think a cherry tomato type, whatever variety it is always an interesting addition. So hopefully that's been of interest to you, and I'll be back soon with another video.